I'm 83 years old. At this age, you don't pretend much anymore. You sit with things the way they are. Some mornings I wake up before the sun, and the house is so quiet I can hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. That's usually when the memories come. Not the proud ones, the other ones, the things I kept quiet about for years, and the things I wish I had kept quiet about. I didn't understand the difference back then. Most people don't. You think honesty fixes things. You think family means sharing everything. You think love can hold the weight of every truth. But after 65, I learned that some truths only disturb the water, and once it's disturbed, it never settles the same again. I learned that too late. I suppose I should explain how a person comes to understand something like that. It doesn't happen in one moment. It happens slowly, quietly, over decades. And by the time you finally see it clearly, the years behind you are already heavier than the years ahead. When I was young, I believed families were supposed to know everything about each other. I grew up in a small house with thin walls and loud voices. Nothing stayed hidden. If my father lost money, we knew. If my mother was angry with her sister, the whole dinner table heard about it. Secrets were treated like poison. Nothing good grows in silence, my mother used to say. I believed her. When I married my husband, Walter, I carried that idea with me like a rule. Walter was a quiet man, not unfriendly, just quiet. He worked at a machine shop outside town, left early every morning, came home smelling like oil and metal dust. He didn't talk much about his worries. That used to bother me. I remember asking him once, in the kitchen, while I was washing dishes, "Why don't you tell me everything you're thinking?" He shrugged. Just shrugged. "Some things don't need talking," he said. I thought that was stubbornness or distance. I didn't realize it might have been wisdom. Back then, I was certain openness meant closeness. I told him every thought that crossed my mind, every irritation, every doubt, every little fear. At the time, it felt honest. Now, looking back, I see it differently. The first secret I wish I had kept came when I was 67. Walter had just retired. We had been married 44 years by then. The children were grown. The house was quieter than it used to be, but still full enough with visits and birthdays. One afternoon, I sat at the dining table going through old papers, insurance forms, bank statements, bills from years before. That's when I found the envelope. It was tucked inside a folder from the late 1980s. Inside was a letter from a woman named Carol. I didn't recognize the name. The letter wasn't long. It was written the way people wrote in those days. Ink pen, careful loops. She thanked Walter for a weekend they had spent together while he was in Cleveland for work. She said she understood why he had chosen his family, and she hoped he was happy. I sat there for a long time with that letter in my hand. My first feeling wasn't anger. It was confusion. Cleveland. That must have been 1987, maybe 1988. He had gone for 3 days to help install machinery at another plant. I remembered the trip. The children were small then. I had been busy with school lunches and laundry. Life was full. There had been no sign of anything unusual. I held that letter like it was a puzzle piece that didn't belong anywhere. When Walter came home from the hardware store that afternoon, I asked him about it, just like that. No preparation, no pause. I walked into the living room and said, "Who is Carol?" I can still see his face. Not angry, not guilty, just tired. He sat down slowly and rubbed his hands together. "That was a long time ago," he said. He told me the truth. At least I think it was the truth. He had been lonely during that trip. Work had been stressful. He had met her at the hotel bar. It had lasted 2 days, 2 days out of a marriage that would stretch almost 5 decades. He said he regretted it the moment he came home. He never saw her again. I believed him. But believing something and forgetting it are not the same thing. After that conversation, something small shifted between us. It wasn't dramatic. We still ate dinner together, still watched television in the evenings, still sat beside each other at church, but a thin crack had appeared, and cracks, they spread quietly. Looking back, I realized something now. That letter had been buried for nearly 30 years. Our marriage had already survived it. It had passed through our lives like a shadow we never noticed. If I had never found it, if I had never asked. Our final years together might have remained whole. Instead, the last 8 years of Walter's life carried a quiet tension that hadn't been there before. Not arguments, just distance. Sometimes I would look at him across the table and imagine that hotel room in Cleveland. I didn't want to imagine it, but once a picture forms in your mind, it doesn't easily leave. That was the first time I understood something difficult. Some knowledge arrives too late to be useful. All it can do is disturb the peace that already existed. The second secret I wish I had kept involved my daughter. By then I was 72. Walter's health had started to decline. Nothing dramatic at first, just fatigue, slower steps, longer naps in the afternoon. One evening, my daughter came over for coffee. We sat at the kitchen table the way we used to when she was young. She asked me a simple question. "Mom, were you ever unhappy in your marriage?" I don't know why she asked it. Maybe she was thinking about her own marriage. Maybe she was just curious about my life. I had a choice in that moment. I could have said what most mothers say. We had our ups and downs, but we managed. Instead, I told her everything about the letter, about Cleveland, about the quiet distance that had followed. I thought I was being honest, generous even, sharing wisdom. But what I actually did was place a weight on her heart. After that conversation, she began looking at her father differently, not cruelly, just differently. You can see it in people's eyes when something shifts. A small hesitation, a quiet evaluation. Walter noticed it too. He never said anything, but I saw it. I had changed the way my daughter remembered her father, and there was no reason for it. He had been a good man, a steady father, present at school plays and graduations and Sunday dinners. Why had I taken that away from him? For honesty? For what I thought was truth? Some truths only travel downward. They fall from one generation onto the next like stones. The third secret I shared when I should have stayed silent. It was about money. Money has a way of unsettling families even when there is plenty of it. Walter and I were not rich, but we had saved carefully. Decades of modest living had left us comfortable enough in old age. One afternoon, my son asked how much we had. He said he was just planning ahead, helping us prepare. It sounded reasonable. So I told him. Exact numbers, savings accounts, retirement funds, the house, everything. At first, nothing changed, but slowly, over time, I began to notice conversations shifting, suggestions about selling the house, comments about inheritance, small tensions between my children that had never existed before. I had taken something simple, our quiet financial stability, and turned it into a subject of calculation. People don't always mean to do it, but once numbers are spoken aloud, they live in people's minds. They start measuring, comparing, imagining futures that haven't happened yet. Before that conversation, our money belonged to our lives. After that conversation, it belonged to their expectations. And I regretted it immediately. Walter died when I was 76. It was a gray morning in November. He had been ill for several months by then. His breathing had grown shallow, and he slept more than he was awake. The night before he died, we sat together in the living room. Neither of us said much. After a while, he looked at me and said something I still think about. "Too many words in a lifetime," he said quietly. I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head. I should have kept a few things to myself, he said. At the time, I thought he was talking about Cleveland. Maybe he was. But now, I wonder if he meant something larger than that. The older you get, the more you realize silence can be a form of care, not deception, care. There are 2 more secrets I wish I had handled differently. One was about my health. After 70, doctors start telling you things in softer voices. Little warnings, possibilities. One year I was told there might be a problem with my heart. Nothing certain, just a possibility that would need monitoring. I went home and immediately told my children, all of them. I thought they deserved to know. Within days, my phone was ringing constantly. Worry, advice, questions, visits that carried a quiet sense of emergency. But the truth was, nothing serious happened. The condition never worsened. Years passed, yet that moment had already placed a shadow over our conversations. From then on, every time I looked tired, someone asked if I was feeling worse. Every doctor's appointment became a family discussion. I had turned uncertainty into fear. Sometimes concern creates its own burden, especially for people who love you. The final secret is the simplest one, and maybe the most important: loneliness. When you reach your 80s, loneliness becomes a familiar visitor, not constant, but frequent. Friends pass away, neighbors move. The house grows larger around you. Some evenings feel longer than they used to. For years, I told my children about it. I said I felt alone. I said the days were quiet. I thought I was simply sharing my life. But what it really did was place guilt on their shoulders. They have their own lives, their own responsibilities, children, work, bills, exhaustion. Every time I told them I was lonely, they tried to fix it. More visits, more phone calls, more apologies. Eventually, I realized something painful. My loneliness was not something they could solve. It belonged to this stage of life, and by telling them about it again and again, I had turned it into something they carried with them. That was never fair. Some feelings are ours to hold quietly. At 83, I sit in this house and think about all of this. The things I shared, the things I should have kept to myself. Family is a delicate thing, not fragile exactly, but sensitive. Certain words linger longer than we expect. Certain truths ripple outward in ways we can't control. When I was younger, I believed honesty was always the right path. Now I'm not so certain. Sometimes peace depends on what we choose not to say. I'm not telling you what you should do. I've lived long enough to know everyone carries their own map. But if I could return to 65, if I could sit beside the woman I used to be, I might tell her this: not every truth needs an audience. Not every worry needs to travel through the family tree. And sometimes silence is not distance. Sometimes silence is protection. I don't have many years left now. You can feel that at this age. The body slows, the mornings come quicker, the nights grow longer. But the mind keeps walking through the past, looking at small moments, small decisions, small sentences spoken across kitchen tables. You begin to understand how powerful those little moments were, more powerful than you ever imagined. If you're listening to this and you still have time, just remember something simple. Peace in a family is a quiet thing. It doesn't survive every truth. Some truths, once spoken, stay in the room forever. I learned that slowly, much too slowly. And now the house is quiet again. The refrigerator hums. The clock on the wall ticks in the hallway. And most nights, that's all the sound there is.